So what were the pains and the cathartic reliefs or digesting the past in writing it up and then filming it?
Um, I would really say the pains, which were large, and the catharsis, which was grand, happened before I started writing.
Mhm.
I don't think I would have been ready to write the film until I was at a point that I had gone through some transformation which allowed me to have distance on the story itself. I always feel that. I feel I've written 4 features, and each one has been on some level autobiographical. This probably the most in terms of the details were actually modeled on journals and diaries and the facts, the minutiae of that decade relationship. But I would say the transformations are almost depicted in the film in a certain way. I mean, you can see the end of the film, if you consider it a coming-of-age film, that something has transitioned, that Eric, Paul as well, but let's just talk about Eric for now, has come to a point in which he can let go. And I think that letting go is actually, to some extent, an embracing and acceptance of himself. But until that point, he couldn't be with himself. He needed someone else to justify his being in a certain way. There's a great, Sandra Bernhard made a movie called Without You, I'm Nothing. And I think you could call that could be the title of this film on some level. It's this sense that without you, I'm nothing. And the truth is, he is somebody. And I was too, but I think that I attached to other people in the way that Paul also attaches to people and to drugs as kind of the solution.
So in that sense, being extroverted can be a relationship addiction or some sort of addiction too?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm still super extroverted, but it's less around sex and less around love. Even though I'm in a loving relationship, I think that it doesn't define me the way that it used to. I don't depend upon it as if I couldn't exist without it.
Slightly intrigued, your previous feature before Keep the Lights On, Married Life, that had some quite big Hollywood stars in it. One would say, Chris Cooper, Pierce Brosnan, etc. And the stars in Keep the Lights On are not, these massive Hollywood stars.
Right.
Was there a difference? Did you find a difference when you worked from one set to the other? Did you work with them differently? Did they work with you differently?
No. I mean, I think, my first film was all non-professional actors. It was kind of people I met, and this was a film called The Delta. And one thing I've realized is that actors are people you put in front of a camera. Anyone you put in front of a camera becomes an actor, and actually they're not actually an actor, they're a person. And what you're trying to attend to as a director is who they are, most essentially themselves. That's why I never cast anyone who I don't see or have an instinct will be able to embody the character without any work, without any study, without any practice, without any rehearsal, that somehow immediately they're going to fit with the language of the story. Because I'm not actually looking for transformation, I'm looking for revelation. And I think there's a big difference. In terms of the process, I have my own strategies of how to work with actors. It involves generally not rehearsing, which is something that I did on Married Life. I did the same on Keep the Lights On. There's a scene at the beginning of Married Life with Chris Cooper and Pierce Brosnan across a table. When we recorded it, it was the first time they'd heard those lines. It was the first time I'd heard those lines spoken. And what that does is it gives a possibility for the unexpected. Always. It works. I've discovered that it works, and certainly I'm not the first director to take that strategy. But, stars. We're all stars.
Did you find anything unexpected when you started making Keep the Lights On then, between the two stars?
Everything. If something unexpected doesn't happen during a day, then I'm dead. Then I don't have a film to make. I mean, really what I'm trying to capture is what happens on people's faces in the moments when they respond to each other, they listen to each other. and what the eyes reveal. And I think the best way to do that is to make the actors comfortable, and yet comfortable enough to take risks and to share themselves in a certain way. I think specifically these actors were more open with their bodies. I mean, this shooting the sex, which we ended up doing the first sex scene on the second day of production, which is something that someone had given me that advice, which I thought was it turned out to be good advice, was don't wait for the sex scene, because then everyone, including the crew, is getting more and more nervous. And
That's how Don't Look Now was shot.
Oh,
We
yeah?
started with the sex scene.
Oh,
Violet
really?
started on the troopers.
Wow. That's interesting. I've been thinking about that all the time lately. So we did it the day 2, and Tour and Zach particularly was like without restraint.
Do a comparison as to his novel and your film. What are the differences in terms of two different people's take on it?
Wouldn't be my. I mean, I a writer can write whatever they choose to, but it was sort of, I'm really trying to tell the film to tell a story it's what I feel I can do as a filmmaker, is to tell a personal story, and so I just speak from my own position.
Mm-hmm.
There's been an argument throughout, a lot of LGBT cinema about how there's so much sex, there's so much drugs. Why do all gay men have to just, get high and have sex, and everyone has sex with everyone? And I think that's one of the criticisms that I've actually heard about Keep the Lights On. What do you say about that? In terms of, is it too much? Is that how you see these things?
I'm just telling my story. I think that I think I'm not here to kind of. I actually think it is progressive to feel that telling the story and describing what is central to the culture that as a gay man I live in. It's not everything of that culture, but it's certainly a part of it, is a positive political act. It brings up dialogue and conversations that should be happening. And to avoid them is to be frightened, and to be. That seems to me more heteronormative than anything else. The attempt to try to say that we're just like everyone else. We are just like everyone else, which means we have our own sets of ways of being, and this is one. I also think the real issue is there's just not enough representation, particularly within the movies, of gay life and gay experience. So if there was more, you wouldn't. And I would finally say that the people who say what you're saying are very, very few. I don't meet them very often. That does not seem to me the general experience, that people who watch this film think that it's misrepresenting or should be more positive. Those are probably Republicans.
I think, because I've heard that for various films over the last few years, it always seems to be the reason for that comment or that criticism is because there's an underrepresentation, so people expect to be represented and then get disappointed if it doesn't represent their exact way of life.
Yeah.
Which I find endlessly irritating.
Yeah.
Especially when you hear that same criticism again and again and again for any film, when it should just be saying, like you said, you're telling your story.
Yeah. I think also that there is, it is a bit of a fearful idea that the representation might misrepresent us to other people, as if there is something that is unseemly about anything going on in this film, which I don't think there is. I don't think that it's a line in the film that actually less people have noted than I would have expected. There are some lines that people have noted more than I expected, and scenes, the scene in the phone booth, for example. I don't know if your generation, I don't know. I'm curious how old are you?
21.
21. So I don't know what that scene is like for you, the scene where he is getting an HIV test. For a lot of men, that scene has been very, very familiar, and like they've had a shock of recognition around knowing that feeling. But there's another scene when he's with the in the hotel room, and the character of Eric says to Paul, you know, someone down the hall is doing exactly the same thing, and that was actually a line from life. I mean, that's what I told because I really felt that on some level we need to be forgiven from thinking we're so unique. It's an unfortunate. Usually, it's unfortunate when you think that your behavior is so special to be worse than anyone else's. And I think in general, you know, in AA they use the term terminal uniqueness, which I think makes some sense. But I didn't know any of the AA language when I used that, but now I do.
So by making a movie that is has a lot of basis in truth in your own personal life, and I'm sure there are bits in there that you just transpose to fill it out a bit. Is there a conflict of interest when you are directing an actor that is perhaps portraying an exact scene from your life to detach yourself from? Is that how it felt to me, or is this just great acting on its own right?
I really, almost by the point that the screenplay is created, it becomes something separate from my history. I bring my history into it, but I was very specific with the actors and encouraged them to think of my history as just one of the drawers that they could pull from, and that there were many drawers, including primarily themselves. I mean, that's what actors work with. They work with themselves and their own memories and their own experiences and who they are. So I never had a sense that they were not, you know, there was no biography, and a biography is also fiction. So I don't think it was a problem for them. And I think they maybe thought it might be up to the point where they began to talk to me about the project, and then they realized, oh good, I'm not. You know, and I cast a Danish actor to play the lead. So immediately you're off to the races.
What were your feelings going into or writing that scene when it starts out as a beautiful love scene and turns into a non-event with poop coming out of someone's ass,
Right.
which I thought was a great scene. It made comparisons to my mind with the last movie Picture Show, when I think the first time you see that sex can be painful and unpleasant, and then this time you can see this can happen, and finally someone is showing it.
Yeah, we called it the shit hits the fan scene.
The fancy?
The shit hits the fan. Have you ever heard that phrase?
Yeah.
So that's what I kept referring to it. The shit hits the fan.
Shit happens.
No, but not shit happens. Shit hits the fan, because I think the shit hits the fan means everything is exploding at some level, and I think that's really what was happening at that point. Narratively, it's a very pivotal scene. The shit hits the fan, and I actually didn't write that scene. My co-writer Mauricio did, and I thought it was very. What was interesting to me about it was unnerving. It was real, and it was also metaphorically very significant in terms of what was happening between the two of them at that moment, and how messy things were getting.
Mm-hmm.
And also I liked the fact that it actually drew attention to anal sex and the facts of what men are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I really wanted to avoid avoidance as much as possible throughout, without being, you know, crass, or, I mean, we did actually have props, which we didn't use. Just so you know. I was like, I don't think we need to, and it's really wonderfully well acted.
You don't need to, because you straight away know what's happened. And
Some people don't, by the way. Some people ask me later, but
they are hetero.
I guess some gay guy asked me that recently.
Really?
He said, I just have to ask, is that what happened? But it's very, very well acted by the two of them. I mean, just by their ability, this is what actors can do, which is that they can actually write prose with their face. They can write paragraphs, and it's amazing. It's incredible.
There's a strong sense in the film, obviously, you know, over the last couple of years of writing and making it, you know, we're in 2012 now, but it feels to me, at the age of 21, like quite a 90s film. Obviously that's the setting of the film.
Right.
Were there any sort of as a director, were there any sort of technical or cinematic devices and things going through your mind that were thinking, how do I make this look like the 1990s and not 2012?
Yeah, it actually goes from 98 to 2008. So it's a decade. It was all shot in the summer of 2011, so it's really a 2011 film. I mean, that's really what you're depicting. To me, time was something that I wanted the audience to experience emotionally. I wasn't particularly interested in it being a nostalgic film. Certain details make you sense that things are changing the way that things do. Not hair and makeup, for example, not at all. Like, they look the same in every scene. Maybe a hair style, a little different, but never haircut, for example. They always have the same. But I think you sense that there's an emotional shift that happens in the course of the film, and that's really based on the performances and the actions that you see in the course of the story. And a few props, like laptops, cell phones, hookup sites, like phone sex sites, which are no longer the grinders of yesterday. So I think those things give you a sense of time passing. In terms of the film, people tell me it looks like a 90s film. What's interesting to me is I think that's just because that's when I started to make films, and it's shot on film, which I've always shot on. So it just, to me, it's continuation of a kind of work that I've always been interested in. I'm curious why you think it looks like a 90s film.
I just feel like, I don't know.
And what is a 90s film?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? Like, I wouldn't like to answer that question. It just feels. I know you say it's not nostalgic, but it just feels, in parts, almost nostalgic for the 90s. It feels, the colours are saturated, and it feels very, harking back almost.
But I think maybe the thing that reminds people of the 90s more is scenes like that phone, the HIV test scene, which, not to say that HIV tests aren't happening, but it did mean something different in that. I mean, that was actually pulled from an earlier point in my life, but it maybe resonates differently. I don't know. Did it feel like a 90s film to you?
No, but I've read that in a couple of reviews, and I've been curious too.
I think maybe it's also for younger people. They just haven't had the experience of 10 years. Like 10 years is in itself something, but specific, whatever, or 20. Like a long relationship somehow seems from the past because it's not something it has to be historical.
Yeah.
And did you do any colour grading post-production? Because maybe people are so used to viewing films that are shot digitally and forced to then look a particular way.
Yeah, well, that's the thing that I really love about film, is it's authentic to itself.
Yeah.
The accidents are accidents that occur not because you're trying to imitate. So there's not an imitative quality to film in the same way that there is to digital, which is still trying to be film in a certain way. I feel like I got through just because I got the support of Kodak and Panavision, the stock company and the camera company, was able to shoot on film.
Before they went bankrupt, right?
They're not bankrupt yet. I'm hoping to get one more film out of them.
So then how do you feel about the projection side of things? I work in the cinema and we have the digital.
DCP.
Yeah, we have the digital right next to the 35mm still,
Oh.
and no one really cares. Our
No.
customers don't particularly care.
No.
But when we do get 35mm print, we try to shout about it.
Yeah.
And recently during the summer, when we got the Dark Knight Rises, intentionally put on both formats to create a discussion about it.
Oh, well.
I was just wondering if that's ever anything that you consider or would prefer, ideally, if it was just as cheap to produce and distribute.
I've never seen this film on 35 because we didn't make prints.
Okay.
The DCP, if it's properly projected, I'm very happy with it. I think it looks great. We shot a couple of places I was on Blu-ray and it looked terrible. I mean, really, really bad. So that was but I made a film called The Delta, which I shot on 16, and
Before Christ.
and never blew it up to 35. And it has a hard time playing in theaters because no one has that.
In what sense were your other features autobiographical?
In what sense?
Yeah,
Well, I made a film about a gay teenager in Memphis.
that I
Cruising.
understand, yes.
And I made a film,
40 Shades?
40 Shades of
How
Blue.
about
Well, it's another Memphis story, and it's loosely about my relationship with my father's girlfriends.
that? Uh-huh.
I never had an affair with my father's girlfriend, as the characters do in that film, but I had a very larger-than-life dad who always had these women who were very different from me, some of whom I've grown to know very well, and the film was about one of those women. And Married Life, which, has anyone you've seen the film, which is a 1940s set film about a man who wants to divorce his wife, falls in love with another woman, thinks that it would be too painful for his wife to divorce her, so he decides to kill her instead, as a way to kind of relieve her of the suffering of the divorce will come, and later you find out the wife is actually in love with someone else, and all these other things kind of come out, and I was watching a lot of 40s
The Cirque or what?
well, I was watching Betty Davis and Joan Crawford movies, and then the idea of the man who couldn't leave his wife because he thought she would die without him it's like, what does keep the lights on? And I'm not sure I got that. That's really what a lot of my relationship felt like. The truth is, I probably thought I would die without him. But on some level, particularly in places, I think the scene where the friend says, you can't save him, I'm not going to sign up for that. That's exactly what someone said to me when I was hiring private detectives, trying to chase after my boyfriend, and they were like, and actually I later got enough educated around codependence and these traditions that I really agreed with them. I wasn't going to save him. I didn't help him. The only reason he survives is because he ran out of money.
And is there an initial guilt by the partner that, oh, I can't save him, or maybe our love isn't strong enough, otherwise why would he take
I think so,
drugs?
but I actually think for me there was like a level of just, maybe I wasn't ready, but also I was very ignorant about very typical dynamics between addicts and their partners, in which is a pretty masochistic relationship, in which you somehow feel that the pain of the relationship is what you deserve, and it's also what is very familiar. So you don't know that there's an option. You don't know that there is a possibility. And you also, for most of that relationship, I wasn't really aware that I was even going out with an alcoholic and drug addict. Which I got an email from someone on Facebook the other day. He told me he broke up with his boyfriend following a screening of the movie because they'd been together for 4 years, and he didn't realize until he saw Keep the Lights On that the experiences that he was living through were unusual, or that you shouldn't just expect your boyfriend not to come home because he's out doing drugs. And he thanked me for saving him 5 years.
So it's like life goes to art, and then art influences life again.
Let's hope so.
Is there an element of Paul's job and his appearance and the way he presents himself to the world that maybe creates that other tension, or certainly in the film, this person can't be drug addict because they're a lawyer and they're doing this every day.
Yeah. I think that's the closet in a certain ways, and that doesn't have to be a gay closet, but there's a way in which we try to put, we all have these performances that we create for the world in these costumes, and we hope that they hold us together. We hope that we then catch up in a way, and I certainly know that my ex, and I think Paul, there's a real hope to be that person that he looks like, and that the world is assuming he is.
Whereas Eric isn't, and I really love that scene where that guy says to him, your face is so open, it's such a welcoming face.
Yeah.
That he's obviously, whether he knows it or not, he's giving something out there to the world that's much more.
Yeah.
Through the film, he really doesn't seem to be trying in any way.
Well, he isn't. So in the course of the last couple of days, I've mentioned both Goodfellas and Ray Liotta's character in Goodfellas, which was important to me. This idea of this very compulsive person who's kind of running around trying to get everything going and solve everything. And then also, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Bugsy, which is the James Toback movie with Warren Beatty playing a gangster / husband / father / and he's always trying to like keep everything from falling apart. And someone said, "Oh, you've got like James Toback, the Jewish version, and Martin Scorsese."
It's
the-
Barry Levinson.
Oh, it's Barry Levinson.
Yeah,
Oh,
Bugsy,
that's right.
with Warren Beatty.
Yeah. Barry Levinson and Martin Scorsese, the Italian version. And I realized that in a way, all these films depict the film director, the person who's trying, and I think that's the film director who's trying to keep it all, 8.5. Another example of trying to keep it all together because there's a possibility that at any moment he's going to fall apart. And I don't feel that so much anymore, except a little bit. So, sometimes.
I'm intrigued about the use of music in the film. So Arthur Russell's soundtrack for the film and how that came about. So if you could give us a bit of information about that.
Yeah, I saw this great movie, Wild Combination, which is a documentary about Arthur. If it's available here, I really recommend
What's the
it.
title?
It's called Wild Combination.
I think I've seen it.
It's about Arthur Russell and his...
Wasn't it the Berlinale?
Probably, yeah. Arthur lived in New York. He died in '93. He made all this incredible music, most of which wasn't heard in his lifetime. When he died, his partner Tom Lee maintained all of these tapes for years in a storage space, and then eventually people got interested and they started to re-release that music. And when I heard it through Wild Combination, I thought it was, I just connected to it very personally, and I came up with the idea that it might work to use Arthur's music as the score of the film, similarly to how Simon and Garfunkel was used in The Graduate, for example, and just to use this pop soundtrack and create a story by how we cut it and how we interpreted it. And so that's what we did. And I think it does actually create this other layer, this other dynamic for the audience.
Especially at the end, it's almost the perfect full stop, because that song I find so uplifting anyway. Yeah. And at the end of that film, you could very easily not feel that. In fact, when the film ended, I felt really good. And then the following day, pretty shit. I thought, 10 years, is that really worth it? And then it comes back again, kind of cyclical in a way. But I think using that song...
What comes back again cyclically?
The feeling good.
Oh yeah? And why?
Feeling up. I don't know, some films just have that quality about them that
right.
you
go down and go up.
Yeah, and you can want to see them again almost immediately, or not, give it a couple of weeks. But I think using that song as the end note, that really sums up.
Well, there's a hopefulness. I mean, I except with the Delta, which ends with a murder, and I feel like actually it's kind of a film where I was a young man watching too much Fassbinder and German cinema and some level. Like, I think ultimately I believe that people have the potential to transform, and that's what the movie points to. I see there's the possibility of that.
In the film, they say it's over. They're probably not gonna talk again.
Yeah.
Have you ever talked again afterwards?
I have. Often, until I made the film. And I think so far the film has been a real wedge between myself and my ex. I think it just imbalanced things in a certain way. Created an imbalance in terms of who, and also maybe drew some attention to the fact that we're both slightly dangerous for each other. Not in terms of getting back together, but just like we have the potential to hurt each other, which we did a lot. And I think maybe both of us are healthier enough to just stay away, because you don't have to go back there.
So it's an inactive volcano in a sense.
I don't think it's volcanic, luckily. No, I don't think it's that. I don't think the significance. I just think it's a sore spot. It's a wound.
What was the budget of the film?
The budget was around $700,000, which is both a little and a lot. It's a little because it's not a great budget in terms of narrative cinema. It's a lot when you have to raise it.
There's quite a lot go on getting the rights to music, because I've always found that I live with a musician and I know how much you can get for having a song used in a film, but I would find that such a deterrent as a filmmaker. depending on who it is.
Well, I had the, before we started making the film, I had the verbal blessing of the estate of Arthur Russell, and or before we started to edit with using that music as significantly as we did, we were in discussions, and they were very excited. I mean, I think this is a movie Arthur would have.
Yeah, it's different in that respect, isn't it? But
Yeah, I think he would have.
Will you ever make a film about the 80s and the emergence of AIDS? Because it's such an untold story, except for Longtime Companion.
Which, by the way, I was the assistant to the director on
You
that
were?
film. Yeah,
I love that film.
yeah.
But it's still,
89.
in some way, untold in terms of feature film.
Yeah.
Have you thought
Have
of
you
that?
seen? You haven't seen How to Survive a Plague, have you? Which is this great
It's
documentary.
a new one, yeah.
Which I'm trying to get Peccadillo to purchase. It's a great film. It's really great. And there's another one called United in Anger, which is also extremely strong. So there's these documentaries which are
Documentary,
beginning
but
to
I'm
do it.
talking
But I
about
have to
fiction.
say, I wanted to make a film about the last few months of Arthur's life, Russell's life, and I haven't figured out how to do it because. And I think there's a beautiful story there, which is in the film also. I mean, he was making music until he died. Like he was just so attached to that, and it was what a positive thing to be attached to. But I think to try to depict the body as it's disintegrating in a certain way is very hard.
Mhm.
So I haven't yet found access to it.
I was going to ask, I mean, you kind of half answered it, but I was going to ask what is next for you after Keep the Lights On?
I'm working on a new film. I finished a script with Mauricio. We began it in January. I also had twins in January. I had kids with my husband, and so it's been trying to. New things are coming in, partially or solely because of getting married. They end up losing their apartment, having to be separated, and the film is about their attempt to get back together. And ultimately, it's a film about growing old together. And the possibility of love to blossom, not just destroy. So it's a real love story.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
thank you for that.
It's
It's
a conversation.
external camera.